Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It is Thursday, and we are here today to talk to you about Inverness, which we are happy to say released on Monday and has been going well so far. So, today we're going to talk you through all the new updates and get you kind of up to speed. We have videos online, but we're going to kind of dive into a lot more of the functionality on Tool in this session. I'm here with Sam today.
Greetings all.
He did not wear a headband, but I did, so I guess
down.
You let me down a little bit, buddy. So we're going to get into it, but for those of you who are new, maybe this is your first sessions. Sessions is every other week where we go over specific tips and tricks on Origin. Sometimes they're bigger project builds. Sometimes they're things where we're talking about specific softwares. Every week's a little bit different. You can check that out on sessions.shapertools.com and see what's coming on and watch all the old ones in the past. So these are recorded, uploaded to YouTube, so you can watch them at your convenience if you can't join us now. But since we're all here, let's get it started. So, Sam.
So we've got this one's celebrating our new, or focusing on our new software that's been released. So it's a free system update called Inverness. And for everyone who owns an Origin, you'll see the little blue dot pop up in the right-hand corner of your screen. Maybe we can point where it'll happen. Over there.
If you have an update, it'll show up right here, the little blue dot. You can click the settings. And just follow the blue dot through the settings here, and right here it will say the update's ready and you can install it. Painless and quick.
Yeah, so that's all. Whenever you're connected to Wi-Fi, you're good to go with that. And we've tried to make it as simple as possible. It's not like pressing a bunch of things, confirming a bunch of things. It just does it in the background, gets you up and running, and you'll find the tool will come alive with a bunch of new core features that we've been working on. And a bunch of subtle improvements and things. We've put out the 2 videos that you've probably seen already. There'll be some more to come that will dive into the record player project or record stand project in more detail. And yeah, but in the meantime, we're going to dive into the details here and look between the main highlight sort of bullet points and see what does this mean for you, the Origin user, and how can you take advantage of these new features. So
yeah, and we'll just quickly go into the info and show you the features there. So you can kind of see all the old releases here. The first thing we're talking about is positioning, where you can set dimensions on a shape in a world, and that allows you to quickly place something without having to move Origin to that location. We have zoom improvements, where you can pinch to zoom on the entire screen to get the perfect view of your project. We have transforms overhaul, which we'll go into greater detail later, which are really great for doing more complex things in a single project. We have mirror, which a lot of people have asked for, where you can just flip a thing in order to cut a stamp or other objects that need to be flipped on tool. We have custom anchors, which Sam's going to get into a lot as we go through this. And we're going to kind of deep dive into that later on in the session. And then pocket refinements, we've made some improvements to how kind of the control while you're pocketing is done, and that is much better now. So you'll see these when you update your tool, and you'll be able to walk through them. So quickly, I'm going to give you kind of the 2-minute show of how these work. So zoom now is kind of based on your mode. So when we're talking about zoom, you can pinch and zoom anywhere, but when you change modes, you'll see that the zoom is actually kind of working with you now. So cut and scan are always the same. They will go to zoom in very far in, and when you hit scan, very far out. Design somewhere in between, but depending on the size of your project, you're going to be moving that to what you want to be. And now what we do is we remember your last level in design mode. So if I go to cut, it zooms in. If I go back to design, it goes back to where I was. If I was zoomed in looking at something recently and I switch modes, when I go back to design, it goes back to where I last was. So design's going to remember where you last were because it really is dependent on the project you're working on. So that's zoom. There's some other features we'll get into, but that's the basics. Position is another one where let's just create a quick circle on tool of 5 inches. Now, previously, you can always move the tool around. It'll snap to the grid, or if you don't have a grid, just kind of quickly move around. With position, you can now just set that. So if I wanted to move this to 0, 0, instead of actually moving the tool, I can just go to the X, type in 0, hit done, and it'll automatically animate that shape over to 0, and then I can do the same thing with Y. And now I have a file that's perfectly centered on 0, 0. So that's position. You can lock that. We're going to get into a lot more detail on how that works and how you can kind of take advantage of some cool things there. Custom anchors, we're going to show you one cool one here, and Sam's going to talk about it while I import it.
So here's a American star, which you guys are very fond of. So previously, our standard anchor points would have the center be the geometric center, sort of the center of the bounding box. And that's not actually the rotational center of the star, so it would always be quite frustrating trying to place that exactly where you wanted it. So now that custom anchors is a thing, I've updated the project on Shaper Hub. This is, I think it's called Basic Shapes. If you search for Basic Shapes, you'll find these to take advantage of. Now it's sort of the rotational center. So it's if Sean changes between the...
So right now we have the custom anchor active, and
Yep.
if I hit the center, you'll see it's just going to bounce around just a tiny bit. Actually, let me zoom in a little bit more so you can see it. So you can see when I change the anchor point how it's moving. That's because that center is not actually the center of the shape. So
custom anchor just gives you options for baking in an alternative place that you want to use for placing and aligning things. We'll play that out in a lot more detail later, but that's just a sort of a pretty recognizable example.
yeah, and you'll see that when I import a shape with that, it automatically selects the custom anchor and shows the icon here. Okay. Cutting improvements, we'll go over those a little bit as we get into some cutting soon. And yeah, I think one thing we should quickly talk about, when we are creating these software updates for the community, for the people with the tool, we're listening, we're taking feedback from the community, from different places. People are writing us emails to support. All these things are taken into consideration when we're building the next set of software updates. So we want to thank you for being part of that and really helping us understand problems that we may not have seen, problems that are facing you, and we're going to go over some of those throughout sessions today to really show you how some of these new features can help solve that, and actually go into one really cool project where the solution was part of that. So yeah, thank you for being there. If you haven't come to community.shapertools.com, which is our forum, we have a lot of people who can help you out with problems. We also will be talking back and forth. You can see Sam, answering some custom anchor point questions earlier this week. So a lot of cool stuff going on there. And yeah, thank you for being a part of this. Inverness feels as much of ours as it is everyone else's. So make sure, use it, give us feedback, and hopefully we will make it the next one even better. So thank you. All right, let me move this down, and we're going to pull something up real quick. And we're going to talk about this for a minute. Boom. So
you guys, you may have seen the video we did. It's a very short, brief showcase of this record player project. We created this to just showcase all the different features we've been using and we've implemented in Inverness. So shout out to all the design, product team, everyone on software who's been behind bringing them to life. We had a lot of fun. I mean, Jake was the one who actually cut this. I designed it, but I was doing some of the meta work in here. We'll look into some of the details of how we went about that. But it was a lot of fun to take advantage of all the new features, and yeah, pretty straightforward to do. So we got little Brusso hinges included there. We custom made some parts out of 360 brass, and then bent that for the handles. We made a little. If we get a chance, we might get into the details of this little brass bending jig.
That's for this brass kind of on the inside there, yeah.
Bars here. But first, we'll just look at, down here for placing these little pockets for the legs. We were using anchor points, and then also for along the top here for placing a lot of these, the cuts for these pockets go beyond the actual stock. So that's a place where traditionally it's been quite difficult to place something.
Yeah, I have this little piece
there,
here. Yeah, let's throw this in front here so people can see what we're talking about. So
you walk through it.
Yeah, so you can see here we have two kind of pieces that are going through, and one of them actually doesn't go through. And if I get a little closer, you'll see there's actually a little curve on it because it's aligned to that edge here. And with custom anchors, you can pull things off the edge and totally clear that while also being aligned to it. Whereas previously you would kind of have to take a guess on the grid where it should lie. So now you don't have to chisel out these parts afterwards. You can really align perfectly now. So that's one really cool section of custom anchors that will be available to everybody now.
Should we drop this down again?
Yeah, sure.
And then Tanya's she's working on our videos. She is working on a much longer version of this build project. So you'll get to see Jake perform all the steps to create this. So yeah, pretty heavy origin project there. A lot of fun.
Okay. Cool. So, and if you haven't seen that, maybe Ted can throw it in the list. We have, YouTube video of that, where you can watch how they built that, as well as all the kind of the features they used, as well as the blog. So if you haven't seen it, there's a whole blog with all the new features and how they're used, specifically using this cabinet for the most part. Ted can throw that in the chat for people who haven't seen it yet. And we also have a whole support page for all the new features where, we're going to go into a lot of detail here, but there's definitely going to be some unanswered questions. So feel free to go check out the support site. Ted can throw that link in the chat as well at some point. Okay, cool. Well, now let's jump into some projects and how these features are actually working together. So we're going to start with a pretty simple one, and I'm just going to load this file up and delete. Let me just delete this grid real quick. Okay, so I've already scanned in this large piece, but it doesn't matter how big it is. One of the things that's really cool, and this is related to kind of the way we made some changes to how shapes perform in the world. So I'm going to go ahead and import a butterfly, and this is a project that we have on Shaper Hub for everybody to use. If you've had Origin for a while, you've probably taken advantage of this at some point, but they're really great little files that are kind of Origin ready for doing any of these type of things. Maybe Goose, we can go over to Sam's screen for a second and kind of show that Shaper Hub project off.
Yeah, so these were designed by Maddie back in the day, and these are just a great way to stabilize a crack. And there's a whole range of different options here. There's some that are actually scaled to different sizes, but obviously we can also do that live on tool. So Sean will walk you through some ideas here.
Yeah, so let's just pick one here. Let's pick this 4-inch wide one here since we have a pretty big piece. So in the past, some of these things were a bit different, and now with Inverness, they're a lot improved. So here we have the file in place mode, and we're deciding where it goes. And one of the beauties of Origin is being able to just move Origin around and align this in a visual manner. Maybe the position is not as important as how it looks with the grain, with the wood, with a crack, with the elements in your piece. So here we have it, and it's currently at a 0-degree rotation. If I go ahead and apply that, you'll see it just rotates in the screen. So as I'm rotating around, that's still always going to be 45 degrees in the screen. And I can set that back to 0. And now you'll notice position is not possible without a grid. So we will talk about that in a minute. But for the most part, I can go ahead and just kind of visually align this here and place it. So now I have this file in the world, and I may want to make a copy or two of it. So if I copy it, let's say I rotate this 45. What you'll notice now is when I zoom in here, and I just want to say, having zoom on Origin is a game changer. It's been quite hard to be in sessions for the past some time without being able to zoom, but now being able to zoom, get a perfect picture of what you're looking at is really awesome. So what you would notice is that the bounding box is always aligned with the shape, whereas in the past it would be aligned with the rotation. And that is really important for two reasons. One is that the scale of the shape never changes. So as long as I don't change the scale, it's going to be the same as it previously was. And this is really important when it comes to being able to make copies, making plugs later, etc., and actually knowing that the scale is the real size of the object. So let's say I make this a 3.5 inch width. It'll grow. Now that's different than the other size. And no matter what the rotation is, it's always going to be the same. So if I copy this object, that scale of the copied object is the same here, right? And that's going to always be the same now. Whereas in the past, rotation would also modify that. So that's a good way to keep track of that. Maybe I forget and I cut this plug first, and I go into cut mode and I cut this, and then I realize I need to create a plug for it, but I didn't remember how much I scaled it. I can just come in here, copy that, and understand the exact scale of that. Okay, so that's one of the changes that really went into it. Another big change that went into this is how the position and rotation are affected. So what you'll notice is if I copy this element, it instantly pops on the origin. I'm moving it around. My rotation is 0 because that's how I placed it when I placed that object. If I copy this one, even if I'm rotated another way, that rotation keeps the 45 in it. Okay, so I'm 45 degrees rotated to the screen right now. Now, one of the things we added in Inverness is the ability to reset this. So if I hit reset, it actually kind of eliminates all that variable and returns back to what I was when I originally created this. And that's really important because one of the big changes we made is how position and rotation are affected when you create a grid. So I'm just going to make a quick grid. If you're not sure how that works, we'll go over it later, but I can just go through the thing and double click the green button, and that creates an instant grid. It's kind of a shortcut for getting a grid in there. Now, why this is important is because now when I copy this, the position of this thing is in relation to that grid. And so anytime you make a new grid, the position and rotation will change with that grid. So for instance, this rotation is negative 1271 degrees now instead of 0, which it was previously. So it's always going to be aligned to your current grid. If I come here and I make a new grid, and I'm just going to do the quick grid again, a double click facing a little different way, you'll notice that same shape, when I copy it, has a new value for position and a new value for rotate. So when you're working with these new kind of transforms that we've created between the shapes and how they work with the grid, remember the current grid is kind of the thing that makes it
that's the reference.
It's the reference. So this is quite cool too, because you can probe one side of a box, place a file, and then I can copy it after I create a new grid, and that thing will actually kind of move around the workspace in a really smart way.
So like for instance, if you were working with these little lamello Cabineo, let's do it in the bench cam. These little guys, you could be placing them here and then come around the other side and create a grid on this side, and when you hit 0 rotation, they'll be oriented correctly to just keep copying and moving.
Maybe we'll jump over here and just show you that real quick. So if I'm going to copy that shape that is not rotated 0 to the grid, and when I go to rotate, it's at negative 52, but if I set that to 0, now it's perfectly aligned with my new grid, right? Because that is the X and Y. And if you open the position, you'll see we added a little element here that explains where the X and Y is, and as you move around the world, that'll update with you to give you a little bit more understanding. So that's some really cool stuff that allows you to kind of manipulate geometry in the world that you're working on, and as you work through your projects, you're going to find ways to incorporate this on the fly, because you can now do a lot more stuff than you previously could.
There was one more thing, like when you first copied it, it didn't jump, it didn't snap to your cutter. This is really handy.
Yeah, so when you don't have a grid and you copy something, it automatically snaps to origin and just moves around like normal. But if I have a grid, when I copy, you'll see we have this new pop down or toast that tells you the shape was copied and it doesn't move. So
hold on, we weren't looking at the screen there, just do it again.
Yeah, sure. So I'll copy that, a little message comes down that tells me it copied the shape. If I wanted to put it right there, I could just go ahead and place, and I'd have two shapes on top of each other. But if I move origin, it'll just start tracking on the grid like normal. Now I can cancel out that and copy again, and now this is where it gets really cool. With the changes we made in position, you can just quickly add a dimension to that. So maybe we just go from 2.9, and I can always set it to 5, and it'll just move with that same dimension. Or if I cancel this, I could add something to that number, plus 5, and now that will update that. So there's a lot of powerful things you can do with position, and we're going to get into that as we talk through the next project. So this is some really powerful stuff we did to the copy, the import flow, but it's really it's going to make making projects on Origin a lot easier when you're thinking about position, when you're thinking about doing really cool things like this thing over here. Maybe if you want to pull that up, actually, the slats on the on the. So this is kind of a simple file here, which you can now create on Tool, and Goose will become the bench cam here. So this is a bunch of slots rotated at a certain degree and just added with about an inch, I guess.
Yeah,
or something.
1.3
inches. So these slats, and this is for the door on the cabinet, can be just created on Tool using a simple file, and moving it each time. So there's some really cool, powerful workflows, especially for simple designs like this that don't require you to set up some fancy jig. Just pull out origin, make your grid, create the rectangle with a rounded edge, and then copy and add a couple inches to each one. So really powerful stuff with position, and let's get into that with the next one, because I think that one is going to be pretty exciting.
So you want to cut to this screen?
Yeah, let's cut to this screen first, and we'll talk. You can talk through it a little bit.
Yeah, so this is Jess Crowe up in Alaska.
I think she's with us, maybe.
She might be lurking there in
yeah.
the comments. Can't see them right now, but we'll hello, Jess. We'll catch up with you if we get a chance. This is her. She does huge resin pour tables, and this particular one is I think it's like a local tribe who wanted their conference room to have a massive, really significant statement table with a local river running through it. So just went and tracked down all the details of that river, found a map, and then created the art for it, and reached out to us to try and get it on cut 25 feet long. So we naturally helped her out, and she bought an origin and then just went to town, and we'll have another look at another view of it here. There's little rocks and things in there, and all the little local I forget what those circles are. Are they
I think they're like towns or
little
something.
Towns along the way, yeah. But really, really well received, really well executed project. Yeah, we'll try this one. Yeah, so that's the underside, and then here's the big office where it is. Yeah, so you can see how that plays out, and you can see the relative scale of it. Okay, cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, they are the villages on the river. But the big thing was Origin was struggling with massive files, and one of the problems she had was orienting it, because she was at one end of this trying to place her file in a corner, and a half degree of rotation at one end was like half a foot of movement at the other end. So it was quite frustrating to try and do that sort of thing. So Sean's going to walk through the solution in amongst all these transform and position improvements. We'll have a look at how it works now, and it's actually pretty seamless and manageable.
All right, so you're going to have to imagine this is a little less of a perfect rectangle, because in the case of a perfect rectangle, we would grid the edges, place it 0, 0, and it would be perfectly aligned. But in her case, the edge of that wood is very important in how the river went through it, and the river bends a lot, so a small degree here may make one piece go too far and one piece on the front come too close. So I'm going to quickly show you kind of the old way, and then we'll talk about this kind of new possibilities with how it works. So I'm going to go into Shaper Hub and import this file. You can see it just comes in, and I think we're having a tough time really making a grid on the live edge slab. So in the old days, you would rotate it 90 degrees, get it roughly close, on origin scale as possible. So I'm just going to type in 56 inches. That's going to get me a pretty good amount here. You can see here I have a kind of a center anchor. I could go to left or right, but it's really hard to see like where the things are going to line up. And I don't need perfect alignment here. I just need it roughly to the corner to corner. And so in this case, I can't really see what I'm doing. Okay, so that doesn't work very well. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a quick grid. And there's multiple ways to create grids. In this case, I really don't even care where the 0, 0 is. I'm just going to make a quick grid here. So we have a 0, 0 close to the corner. Now, what I can do is I can import that file again, and I'm going to scale it up to 56 inches. And I'm going to kind of move my tool over to where I want it to be. And I'm going to rotate it, maybe, let's start with 90, and I'll pick the bottom right-hand anchor. Okay, so now I'm just going to kind of quickly find where I want this to kind of locate on, and I kind of want it to locate right around here. So I'm going to go ahead and say that's where I want it to be. And you can see it's not really in the right spot.
So what you're talking about there, though, is the position of that anchor point is what you're
correct.
located.
Correct. So if you can see up top, we're at -2 to where I created that grid. All I have to do is come up here to position and lock, open, and click done on each of these numbers, and you'll now see a lock icon appears here and here, and this is where it gets really cool. So when I start moving origin, now that position's locked, and Goose, maybe if we come to the top here, you know, I'm kind of here when I started and locked it, and I'm actually wanting to spread this file out kind of across the corner of this material. So I can pull origin over here without the file moving now, and that allows me to come over here, zoom in, and understand where I'm going to hit visually, right? Because I don't have a specific edge I can reference. I just need to get this to match kind of really close to where the image is. So in this case, all I have to do now is come back over to the rotation and start typing in numbers. So let's start with 80 and see where that leads us. So that's getting pretty close already, and I could just keep typing in things until I get 75 is a little too little. So let's try 78. And now when I come over here, you can see when I zoom in, I'm seeing pretty good amount of where it's landing, and I can make a decision on where I want that to land. So that's not going to move while I'm moving origin around, and what this allows is the ability to feel very confident about where the file is going to be before you place it, do some test cuts, have to come replace it. This allows you to be very confident about where it's going to be before you start placing it.
And from the far edge, the ability to manipulate the position is still live as well, right? You could say, I want it half an inch back towards me or something,
so
right?
let's just do that now. So I can come over here and I can say, you know, I really want more of this to be in there. So if I go to position, now I can use this to figure out where I am. So X is this way and Y is this way. So what I really need to do is move the X further negative. So let's try -4 and hit done. And you will see when I zoom back in, actually, let's try -5 actually. Ooh, zooming out. Okay, here we go. So now you can see that little circle part is actually further in, and that will allow me to really specific placement of where this is. So if I come back over to the corner where I was previously looking, that's actually changed. Now I have to think about that. So,
and that was moving it in the was it the Y direction or
correct.
X direction of the grid?
Of the grid. So in that case, you'd probably want to make sure it was aligned a little more with your material. But I think that is everyone gets the picture. But you know, this is the type of thing where now this is possible with Inverness. Previously, it was could be quite of a problem. It's also worth noting that this is not just helpful for large things, but actually quite helpful for smaller things. When you're on the workstation and you want to move stuff, lock it and make sure that the other end is in the right spot before you're done. So I would like to say a big thank you to Jess. You know, she worked with us through this project, documented her problems and issues, worked with us. We thought about it with all the other changes we're going to do, and like I said, these kind of improvements really come from everybody being together and helping us help you, and yeah, we're excited to bring these improvements in. So that's kind of the position and zoom stuff. I did want to show one other cool little thing, so I'm going to remove this file real quick. And I thought this is one of the things that's kind of a small detail, but it's worth putting in. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a 2-inch circle, and I'm just going to position it somewhere. Let's just position it where it lies. So this is actually quite cool. Let's reset this. So if I'm moving origin around, I can then position it, and wherever it is in the world, it automatically shows, and I can lock that. Now, one of the cool things is if I start moving the tool, you're going to see that it tries to keep that in view even when I move the tool all the way across. And this is just kind of a really cool little detail that allows you to think about stuff and visually look at other things. If you change the view while you're doing this, it'll no longer do it, but double tapping will get you back into that mode.
So this is a great example of like getting the technology out of the way, like just doing things in a way that it's like you're intuitively woodworking, right? You're not messing around with computers and thinking digitally. You're just, I want to place this at this position, and then the technology sort of steps out of the way and lets you just think about your project. That's the goal there. So yeah, no, great work with Isan, one of our designers, has been hands-on, making all these things really great for the user and sort of unifying how it behaves across the board. So
yeah, if you're out there, son, thank you, sir. All right. Okay, next one. Let's see what we're going. All right, this is going to take a minute. I'm going to go ahead and swap this out while you get us ready for the
we'll
spoke
cut to
shave.
my screen, Goose. So for all the stuff we've been discussing here, these are all documented on the website. So Josh has been jotting these down and keeping everyone informed. So I'll show you how to get to the documentation for the new features. If you need more than what's written on the little onboarding screen, yeah. So hit the support button at the top, or sorry, bring up the pop-up at the top, and then go down to Help Center. And then in here you'll see we're going to be using Origin, and come down to design mode. So in here you'll see all the updates. So we're going to get into some of the others in more detail, but if you just want info on this, here it is. This is sort of spelling out how mirror works. There's a walkthrough of position with all the key info called out. So some great docs here, all sort of visually explained with animations and things to make it clear. So I might have been working with Tatiana and co to do that, but yeah, really good info. Some of them obviously are short and brief. We're going to dig into anchor points, custom anchor points later. But yeah, take a look in there. If you're ever sort of apprehensive about how things are supposed to be working, it's all spelled out clearly there. And then if it's not covered there, be sure to reach out to either support, is that support@shapertools.com?
Correct.
And or on the community. So you can just hit community up here, and you can type in any question you want. You can search. Actually, the same applies there for under the support center. If you just click Help Center, and if you're not familiar with navigating in here, if I just typed in mirror, there you go. So yeah, take advantage of that. Support, Help Center. That's where most of the documentation is. And if you've got a topic you want to dig into, take a look there, take a look on the community, and then take a look at emailing support if you want more help.
Okay, awesome. All right, so while he gave that quick demo, I already set up Workstation. If you don't know, Workstation is a super companion to Origin. Essentially, it's a fixturing and modular workstation for Origin that allows you to quickly get things assembled and set up so you can get to work. So we're going to quickly go over a project I want to show. Pretty excited about it. This is a simple spoke shave that I built on Origin, taking advantage of some of the new features in Origin, specifically around custom anchors and being able to do things like align quickly and cut over the edge. So we're going to walk through some cutting on this and show you some how that works. So quickly, I'm going to set up a scan. And these files will be available on ShaperHub after tonight, so that everyone can take advantage of them. They're actually it's a kit from Veritas, so you just purchase the hardware. It's actually really nice hardware, and then you can. I took the file that they kind of give as a paper template, converted it to a digital file with 2 files that are using custom anchors to do quick placement and cutting. So I'm going to quickly set this up and show you kind of how that works. So I'm just right now making a grid on Origin with the bit. So this is the engraving bit that comes with Origin, and if you're new to it, yeah, just switch to Origin camera for a second. So this is the engraving bit that comes with Origin. You can quickly just turn it upside down and stick it in the collet and use this as a way to probe geometry. So we're going to use this to quickly align the digital world in Origin to the physical world on Workstation. So I will go ahead and do this.
So you don't want to do that with the stock cutter. Cut to the front camera. So if you put these cutting flutes inside the collet, you'd kind of crunch on them with the when you tightened it up. So only do that with the engraving cutter. But that gets you a very accurate sort of 1/4 inch cylinder to probe with. If you were trying to probe, some people do. People that are more accustomed to using Origin will actually use the cutting flutes to probe with. But if you're just getting into it, avoid that. Flip your engraving bit.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set up a little piece in the workstation. I'll just walk you through my process here. I'm using double-sided tape, and because of custom anchors, I can actually do some pretty cool stuff with the way it's positioned in here. So typically, maybe if we come over to the workstation cam, Goose, and I can make it. Oh, it's looking pretty good. So typically, if we're cutting all the way around this, so I can get this final shape here, I would have to kind of put it in the center, put some double-sided tape, and hope that it doesn't come off. But I personally like to kind of push it up to the edge and be careful cutting around aluminum. But if you have set the file up right, in this case I have, you can kind of just cut the edge here. And I'm going to grid off this piece, place the file with a custom anchor point, and that will still overshoot. So I'll show you how we're going to do that. So quickly, I like to use this method, which is put the tape down on the piece, just one-sided, take the support bar and put that on top. This allows me to quickly zero out this piece and raise it up until that makes it perfect mate. So now I can take this off, put this back onto my piece here, and now I know this is perfectly aligned. There's going to be a little bit lower because I didn't take the tape off, but in this case it's not enough to matter. So I will peel off the double-sided tape and kind of put this against the back here.
So
Give it a good pressure.
Know
yeah.
What's going to be cut? Is it in this orientation at the moment? Yeah.
Yes, correct. So we're going to cut out these the wings on the spoke shave here, and this one actually is quite cool. And then I'll show you the other side as well. So I went and put those in. We'll make the grid quickly. Very simple. Just scan your workspace in. Hit the grid button. New. Make sure your bit diameter is correct, and then I'm just lowering the bit until I can make contact with that piece. Now, I can always zoom out in grid mode. Now I can zoom out in grid mode. It wasn't previously possible, but I can zoom out, get the right thing. It's a very soft touch. You don't need to push very hard. You just want to kiss the edge of that material. Make your second click. Now that creates the X. Then I come over to the edge and create the Y. Now, I see what you're saying. You can't actually see what I did here because I scanned it before I put the piece in. So I'm just going to quickly update the image so I can visually align it. And we do that by going to scan. You'll see it automatically zoomed out with the new zoom. And one thing that's really cool, kind of a side note, is we've now in Inverness created the ability to name this workspace right here. So let's go ahead and do that. I can just quickly come in here and call this spoke shave.
Yeah, the fact that's presented sort of at all times just gives you an opportunity to, do some bookkeeping, keep everything clean and tidy, and easy to find should you want to come back to this. This might be a disposable one, but if he'd set it up as a sort of indexed fixture type arrangement where he could just keep putting in the next one, the next one, the next one, he's going to want to find that again. So, naming your workspace is a great way of staying on top of that.
And so there, I just clicked add to scan, hit the green button, kind of added some images in, and now we get a better picture of that piece of wood here aligned with the grid. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about custom anchors, and I'm going to come in here, find this file, and cool. So I'm going to go ahead and click the top file, and what you're going to notice is this file is actually incorrectly built. I have a couple pieces hanging off the edge, and you'll notice that main bounding box, it may be a little hard to see. Let me move down here. Yeah, there we go. That's a little better. The main bounding box, by default, it's using the custom anchor, but if I had before Inverness selected the bounding box, I would be selecting this because it includes all the geometry in the piece. With custom anchor, it doesn't care about the geometry. It only cares about this little point that I've already specified. And so what you're going to see is when I line this up with 0, 0, here, I could do it by moving the tool. I could do it by inputting position. I'm actually not placing that bottom of that curve on this piece. I'm actually including the stock dimensions in my file. So now that I place that, now I have perfect alignment with this piece and with the design file without having to think about, do I grid the backside and then place off the top corner? You can just make your life a lot more simple by embedding these into the file themselves. And Sam is going to go over those in a few minutes. But let's get to cutting because we haven't done any cutting yet. So, and I'm going to quickly talk through something. Maybe while I'm cutting, Sam can explain it. But each bit we use, and I'll come over to here. Maybe the bench cam in the front here. There's a certain amount of cutting flute length here. So if you're new to using Origin or routers, you can't cut with this whole thing. You can only cut to where the sharp edges go to. And in the case of the stock bit that we use, that's a 3/4 inch depth. So this material is a little bit deeper than that, so I'm going to show you there's two options. One is you can buy a deeper bit that can cut deeper. Two is you can use these bits. Oh, here's a deeper bit, so we can show you the difference in the length of cut there. This is a 1.5" cutter. That's a 3/4 inch. So quite a bit difference. But I'm going to show you a little pro tip on how to get a little more length out of your cutter while being safe.
So if you maybe just get cutting, I'll talk over
Perfect.
that as you go. Yeah.
Perfect.
So the downside of using one of these really long bits, I mean, you'd think, why wouldn't you just use the longest bit imaginable? We've got a session sort of dedicated to cutters and materials if anyone's interested in getting into more detail. But the longer this cutting flute gets, the more flexible the cutter gets. So you end up with chatter and reduced cut quality when you end up cutting very deep or loading it up in hard material. So if you're working with really soft material, often a long cutting flutes work fine. Like people use quite long cutters for foam, and if you're doing any of our Sys1 box installs, something like a cutter like this would be epic. But yeah, once you're into like harder woods and things, those long cutting flutes, not as fun to operate, and the cut quality deteriorates as a result. So Sean's going to do a little cheat here. I'll let you just kick off. And
yeah, sure. And yeah, it's not on the hub yet, so we will update that Shaper Hub file later on tonight. I'll get it up online so people can start playing with it. Okay.
And I'll encourage everyone to, if you've got questions about any of the features for Inverness, or actually any question, we'll try and get to them in throughout the video. Get them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end.
Perfect. Okay, so one cool thing, and I know people have seen it in the past, is sometimes when you're in cut mode, you really don't know what you're looking at. You're too far zoomed in. Well, now with the zoom, you can just quickly zoom out and get a bearing on where you're at in the file. If you're doing a bunch of holes, this is awesome because you can just zoom out a little bit and realize, okay, I'm starting on the far left hole versus having to move the tool left and right. It's just a little time saver. I'd also like to point out one other little thing, which is a new improvement, which is the cut button. So when the spindle is off, this is now grayed out, and when I turn it on, you can see that it turns a full green, and as it turns off, it dims. So it's a little hint so that you don't get this message over and over, that I find is a really cool little improvement. That's just part of those little details that we're trying to finesse as we update the software.
And if you pay attention closely, from the zoomed out state, you can still transition to cutting immediately. You don't have to like re-zoom into the standard state. Like he'd be way zoomed out.
Correct.
If he's got like two rectangles, one with a bit of detail overlapping, he can zoom out to the whole project, and then you can use the switch feature to go between the two different shapes. Make sure you've got the right one, and then start cutting immediately into the one you've got selected.
And if you're too far out, it'll ask you to reset the zoom first. A green click will do that, and then you're back in the normal mode. But you can get out quite a bit before you have to do that.
Awesome.
Okay, so let's just get into it. I'm going to do 1/4 inch passes with a 0.02 inch offset, and Sam will kind of walk you through a little bit more of the details as I get through this. Note, one thing is, because I have aluminum behind me, if we go over to this cam here, I'm actually, if we go over to the workstation cam, Goose, if you see here, the aluminum's directly behind this, so I have to be very careful about how I'm cutting this. And because I'm doing this shape here, I'm only cutting the front piece of this. And one of the things that I find with custom anchors is, instead of designing a file that cuts all the way around it, you can just design the file cutting part that you need. And in this case, I kept it full shape just so I could start and stop the cuts anywhere. But I'm only going to cut from here to here a couple times. So I'm going to get into it.
I'll step away a little bit so it's not too loud. Give me a heads up if this is too noisy. But what Sean's doing here is he's going to start. Yeah, I have to walk out the door maybe. Sean's going to be cutting down, and he's going to be increasing his offset further away by just a fraction. And what that's going to enable him to do is to cut down to like 3/4. So that's using the full cutting flute. And then if he moves away ever so slightly from that, he can continue cutting a little deeper. And that'll hopefully get him to his full depth he intends to cut there. But that means if he was to continue driving down without doing that tiny offset, once he hit his maximum flute depth, you end up, it gets quite difficult to cut because there's no flutes there clearing material. So what you end up with is the cutter scuffing against that surface. and it can end up getting so hot that it actually damages or burns the wood because it's spinning at 10,000 RPM or more. So that's how he's approaching this. So even though he's got a short cutting flute that technically wouldn't let him cut to the full depth in one direct straight down session of multiple depths, he can do it by adding a little offset as he goes. And that just gives him enough breathing room for the area that's not cutting to clear, make it through without any causing friction and causing burning. So this is a fun little project that actually doesn't take that much time. Jake set up a little jig that Sean will bring out in a second for orienting the tool, once again in the workstation, so that it's at the correct angle to accommodate the blade. And with some new custom anchor features, we're now able to start getting quite sophisticated with how all these things come together. But we've presented it in a way that hopefully to you, the user, is very intuitive, very straightforward. In fact, if you're not interested in creating custom anchors, you can still use all of the files that we've put up on Shaper Hub. So for all the hardware files, for that star file, that sort of thing, for instance, I've gone through and added custom anchors to them so that you don't have to think about any of this. You just grab the file and it's got appropriate options for you to place with, be it custom anchors, or you can always switch back to the way it was previously with the bounding box, the regular 9 anchor points. So we'll take a look at some of those once Sean's cut this. We'll take a look at some of the projects up on Shaper Hub. Also, if you see any projects that you want to cut that you don't that need a custom anchor, like once you get familiar with how they work, you'll be looking for them everywhere. So if there's something you struggle or are frustrated placing, please reach out to us, either support or on the community. Just write an @ symbol and then Sam, and you should be you'll send a message to me, and I'll try and make sure you've got what you need there. So I think Sean is pretty much the whole way through here, and we might be able to see a tiny little, there's a seam between the two areas where he was cutting that he'll be able to sand out. But that's just a little cheat to get you a deeper cutting depth without bringing in a different cutter than the stock one. So I can't actually see the settings there. He might be coming back and doing one more kind of air quotes finishing pass there, just to get rid of that last little piece of material. But I guess you won't need to sand it. But once you're at 0, then you're sort of pushing your luck again with that the friction build-up I was talking about. If you're cutting a long area, your cutter will get quite hot and start to burn wood. But looking good. We got something that's starting to look pretty spoke shave-like.
Starting to get there, isn't it? All right, so let's take this off. And this double-sided tape, we actually sell it on the Shaper store. It's quite good. I mean, I have found that pulling this up to pull it off that way works pretty well. If it's a bigger place, you're going to have to get some pry bar to get some leverage up underneath it. So, all right, so let's go up to here so I can show you what we just did. So this is the profile we just cut, this part as well as this part, and you'll notice this wasn't cut at all because it's perfectly aligned with that front edge which we took out. So this is the first part of the process here. And let me take off these headphones because I'm talking very loud. Okay, so next up, and this is where custom anchor points come in, and I'm going to show you how to do the next step, which is we're going to take this piece, and we're going to turn it into this piece. Okay, so I will just come over here. I'm not going to actually cut this one, just going to kind of show you how we do it, because we're starting to run out of time a little bit, but let's pull back over here. So if we come up to this here, I need to leave a little bit of space around, because if you'll notice at the top here, I actually have a little cut on the back just for your thumbs to kind of go into. So if it was flat, it wouldn't feel quite as nice. So we are going to have to cut all the way around. So make sure if you have the workstation at the top level, you leave enough room here for the bit to travel and some offsets. So I would probably put this down right about here with double-sided tape, same thing. Level that with the top with the support bar, and now what we're going to do is I'm going to just pull up a scan that I used previously, and let's see this real quick.
Did you name your workspace?
I did not. You know, this is where it's like it's
workspace?
very useful to name your workspaces, because otherwise you'll be like me, looking through workspaces. But look at that, first try.
Well played.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and erase the cuts just so we can see it, and I will delete this shape so we can see how the placement works. So I have now done that. Let's assume I made a grid here on the same piece using the same bottom left-hand corner. Now when I go to import, I'm going to select that file, and what you're going to notice here is for one, I have some extra geometry in it, so ignore that. I'll clean that up before it gets on the shaper hub. But because of custom anchor points, that extra geometry, like we said earlier, doesn't really matter. Custom anchor points are selected by default, and I can just move it to 0, 0. And what you're going to notice here, and after I place it, or let's actually investigate before. So we're just going to lock this at 0, 0, and then I'll move over here and zoom in. So there's actually a cut that has to go across the top edge, and I'll pull this over here to the workstation camera, Goose. This cut here actually has to come all the way through, and I'm actually aligning on this edge as well. So if I didn't have a custom anchor, I wouldn't be able to cut all the way through, and we'd have a curl in here that I could chisel out if I wanted to, but let's just do it right. So we come over here and we place it, and now that pocket is actually going to be overlaid on the edge of the material, because you can see the white grid showing me that edge of the material. And here the pocket now is actually extended over. We would cut the pocket, come back, change the inside, and now we're over cutting the edge of that material. So that's that would be step 2, and you'll be able to experience this on the Shaper Hub yourself. And then that would give you, look at the magic, this file. Boom, we just cut it. It was so fast. But now we have to do one last thing, which is figure out how to cut the center part. So we would have this file from there, and now we need to get to this element here where we're cutting this. So Jake graciously helped me out and designed an epic contribution to this project, which is this here. So these are files that we'll add on there too. You know, I did mine previously cutting with a Japanese pull saw, and then I just chiseled out the waste. But how do we do this with Origin? We build a jig, perfectly aligned.
Should make a note, all of this is very achievable now with the new transform tools and everything, right? You can make rectangles, rotate them by the exact angle you need, add the little all the details you need to create that.
Totally. So in this case, we would double-side tape this to the workstation, and then we would double-side tape this to here. Now I'm going to bring it over to the front cam, Goose, so I can get a little more detail about how Jake built this, because it's pretty epic. So here's the piece here. Let's zoom out a little bit. And what we did is, because we're just hollowing this out, all we need to do is take, and I'm going to flip it around. We're going to probe off, we're going to make a new grid and probe here, here, and here on the block. And we're going to physically align the inner edge of this with the outside of this line here. So now when we probe this, we have a grid that's aligned to this, and we can just make a quick rectangle on tool starting at 0, going all the way up, leave room for the back of the aluminum board so you don't cut through it, and you can just pocket these down to the perfect angle, put your piece on, and then you have a perfectly aligned piece that's pocketed out with Origin. So this will be available on the Shaper Hub. I'd also encourage you to try out your own ideas if you think there's a better way to do it. And yeah, hopefully that was a helpful little intro into how custom anchor points work, and a cool little project that you can just buy the hardware. The hardware is quite cool too. It's a really nice brass pieces, so you can lock. It teaches you how to thread the wood, so you can lower and raise the blade as you're working with it. So don't mind my little prototype Baltic birch one. Sam was giving me a lot of mess earlier, so we made Jake make us some really nice cherry ones, and we will be excited to see what type of wood you choose to create your own.
So I got it's not really a question, it's more of a comment. Apparently I look a bit awkward, and
It's
I'm
because
in
you
no
don't have a
pain.
headband.
I'm in no pain. I've got a bunch of cables and microphones and things attached to my shirt, so all is fine. I just I don't move very fluidly right now, and I don't want to put you through me rearranging it and all the noise that comes with that. So we'll soldier on. We'll soldier on. Yeah, thank you, by the way. Okay, next example. Do you want to do the position lock one?
Yeah, I was thinking we'd go
do
through
custom anchors.
I think we should go through custom anchors a little bit more in detail. You know, one of the things we went a little light on the early material for custom anchors, so Sam's going to walk you through some of that.
Yeah, so we've sort of seen some of it applied here. We're going to look at some more examples, like we saw the little star, and we're going to look at how we go about implementing our own, and how we take advantage of the files that Shaper Tools have already prepared for you. So yeah, first up, the goal with custom anchors is to enable you to place, bake in a position and orientation for your shape that isn't one of the standard 9 ones. So even if you were just wanted to place a shape, you could include it, even if the file technically worked with one of the 9. If you wanted to stop, say, an apprentice or someone else in your shop from choosing the wrong anchor point, just make a custom anchor point in your file, place it how you want it, and then there's no real chance. Just say use the custom anchor point, and that's the default one, so that's how it's going to come in by default. So it's just reducing risk, and it's taking care of the details in easy digital land where you can hit Control-Z, versus complicated sawdust land where we haven't invented any Control-Z yet, unless you count pocketing out a rectangle and then a positive rectangle plug, in which case maybe we have invented woodworking undo. But yeah, the goal is to make sure that it's simple, and it can be done in any kind of 2D app. It doesn't require a bunch of complicated setup. It's something that sort of anyone can make in any sort of 2D app, be it Inkscape, Illustrator, Affinity, and then people can even make their own through, if they've got like programming, apps and things, they can include it in that easily. So yeah, we'll walk you through that now. So first, here's all the Shaper projects. That's my screen. Very good. So I've already hit sync to my origin, right, Sean? If you want to take a look at this Craig clamp,
sure.
That's a good example where a custom anchor may be advantageous. So in this bottom left corner, there is sort of at the very top here.
One more.
Yeah. Right. So select that guy. Oops. I'll have to add one. So we'll go through this project, and I'll send one to you. So this is what a custom anchor looks like. Basically, it's just a triangle, and we've got our x-axis and our y-axis. You can also refer to the support document we had earlier. So the long edge is y. It's a right triangle, so this angle is 90 degrees, and then there's a short edge, and that will define x. You can put it in here, any angle, and it will define what your y angle is when it comes in on tool. So undo that. I'll copy that, or actually I'll make it from scratch in the Craig one. So if I wanted to see in this bottom corner here, I've got a little dog bone that I've included here. And that may be good for installing it, but I actually may be interested in this edge here. So if you don't need to worry too much about the details. I'm dragging from the ruler over here to make a guide so that I can then place a custom anchor in this corner. So I'm just going to go with the pen tool. I'm going to click once, and then I'm going to drag down. I'm going to hold down Shift. So now it's 90-degree angle. And then I'm going to hold down Shift again, another 90-degree angle, releasing Shift, return to the top, click the button. So now I've created a triangle. So that's a closed triangle, and currently it's got no fill. I'm going to add a red fill.
Yeah,
So
and worth noting, like currently, the only way to create custom anchors is in the design software, not on tool.
Yeah. So this is just gives you the advantage that you can bake in these positions in advance. So now I'm just going to come down here and have it align in that bottom corner there. So I'm just snapping it there. That's easy to do. So now instead of measuring my position relative to that dog bone detail, which I'm actually not interested in, I'm interested in my straight edges. So if I then save this file, save as test 2. So I'm just saving a new version of the same thing. I'm using the standard shaper export settings, presentation attributes.
And you can find this on the support page as well later.
And then I will save this up to Sean. So upload to origin files. And then I will choose on my desktop that file I just created. And then Sean, see that the little red thing there? Sean will see this immediately on his origin. So I'm connected to Wi-Fi using the same profile as Sean is on.
Boom, it's magic. Okay, so now I can select it, and now you'll see where that last file didn't show this custom anchor point icon down here. Now we're showing it. And if I zoom in, you'll notice the dot is not on the corner here. It's actually inset. So now I can just come down to 0, 0. And now I know that that inside line and that bottom line are perfectly aligned with the grid that I've created, giving me perfect access and control over this type of file.
Oh, that's fantastic, Sean. Let's do another one. Let's keep messing around with the same one and
All right, let's do it.
How we can make some changes. So then you could do something like, you might be like, I want to, put it off-centered somewhere. So this is actually quite interesting as well. So we'll save this, save as test 3. And then we'll upload that using the same settings. Upload a file, test 3. So now what's going to be really interesting here is the bounding box of the object is not impacted by my offset there.
And just like magic
anchor.
Again, look at that. Okay, so now you can see that the dot is way outside of the shape. So if I go to the same location, 0, 0, that file's actually going to be offset from that. So this is a great way to bake in positional information into your file, even when you're using a grid on the edge of a material.
So for things like those Cabineo files, these little guys, they are cut in a way that you cut beyond the edge of your stock. So that's where you want to offset these. And then the same applies to SOS type hinges. Like they might be 1/8 of an inch in from the edge. So you would just put your anchor point 1/8 of an inch below and you're good to go. People are going to get the right alignment by default. But wait,
there's more. Okay, we should do one with a rotation baked in.
So then, let's go back to Illustrator. Hope this is all making sense. Feel free to reach out to us. Oh, the other thing with this, the scale is now talking about the scale of your geometry, not the scale of your geometry plus whatever bounding box would include the anchor point off to the side there. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, if I wanted to then bring it in, either rotate it arbitrarily or...
Yeah, like a lot of times you're rotating something based on an edge grid point, but you want to rotate that file. You can just rotate the custom anchor point 90 degrees and align it to whatever you like.
Yeah, so I'll put it up here, file, save as. So you will all get familiar with this and hopefully find it quite useful quite quickly. So now this is an example where maybe, you're exporting a file. You could rotate the whole file and then use that, or you could put an anchor point somewhere and rotate it and have it automatically set up. So we'll upload that. And now, as with all, here we go, you'll see it.
Okay, so now you see it's actually the little red triangle in there, and when I click it, it automatically rotates the file to align to that the way that thing is rotated. So this is a pretty cool way where you can kind of design in whatever way looks good on your computer screen, but then have it rotate automatically to the tool based on how you're gridding and placing things.
Yeah, so here's an example. Like I've got a like a bunk bed I'm working on, right? So I have a very long piece with a lot of dowels in it, and then I'm doing some little blind box joints at the edge, but I want to cut them independently. So I've gone, and this is my pockets for the box joint. So you can see I've got a couple of details here that help. A, my anchor point is aligning this object to the stock, and B, it's inside this edge versus the perimeter bounding box. And C, it's rotated 90 degrees because I'm going to come and cut this long ways down the board rather than at 90 degrees. So you can just do little tweaks and things that speed up the process, make it more obvious what the intent was for this file. Like actually for the record player, for instance, there was a bunch of anchor points in that, and the handoff between Jake and I was actually really seamless because usually A, the files were named something sensible, B, the anchor point kind of defined where that was going to go on his stock. So there wasn't a lot of room for error or confusion. Sorry, we've got a compressor running now. It's quite a quiet compressor.
Yeah.
But it is a compressor nonetheless. One more thing, switch back to the regular, one of the other anchor points.
Let me delete this. Just moves. Okay, you want what?
So with that last one, bring it in, and then do a flip. Actually, is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah. So this is actually a great one because we haven't really talked too much about mirror yet. So mirror is now a new feature under the scale menu, and it's these two buttons here. And when you click them, it just mirrors that object. So if you have like to cut some piece that is alternate of the other piece, like the inside of a drawer that needs to match, you can now do this directly on tool by clicking these buttons. Now, if you have a custom anchor point, these mirrors actually happen over the custom anchor point. So you can see that, it's not rotating around there, it's rotating around the point. So I'll bring one out that's actually outside the shape because this one makes it really easy to see. So if I come here and I have the anchor point in the middle and the shape up here, when I come to mirror it, it actually mirrors across this anchor point in that its own coordinate system. So that's pretty cool, and you can see it's changing the numbers there. But really all you care about is that it's flipping over the anchor point. So if you're doing something that matches side to side, this will give you that flexibility on tool without having to design two different files and make sure this is the left and that's the right.
And the same applies to rotation. Josh did a great example of like a clock face. He made the little dashes and then just copied them around, and because the anchor point was offset from the dashes that he set up for the 12 o'clock, he could copy them around the whole face. But yeah, you'll find interesting ways of really exploiting this, I'd imagine.
Yeah, quite cool. So I think that we're a little over an hour. I think we should jump into a couple quick things before we wrap it up, because we had a couple cool little
you wanted to do
tips.
Position lock?
Yes. I want to show that one.
And replace file.
Okay, so two killer features that are now capable on Origin and Inverness. So one is, sometimes when you're aligning stuff, numbers make total sense. You're just entering position, it's a perfect alignment, etc. But sometimes you need alignment in one axis and a visual alignment in the other. So I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. And so let's say we're designing something very simple, and I'm just going to make a new scan really quickly just to clear that last one out. Okay, and you'll notice one little update. When you save the scan, it tells you what number it is, so that, or if you have named it, that'll tell you as well. So it's just these little like hints that we're adding in as the tool gets better over time. And so I'll make a quick grid just because we don't really care. We just need it to have a grid that can align with that double click on the green button, and that sets up a grid instantly. So let's say I'm making a small little coaster or something. So I'm going to go to the Inverness session, and I made this one with a glass. So I have two files. I really want to align them together. So I have this glass, and I'm going to blow it up a little bit with the scale function. I'm going to change it to 3. Okay, so it's much bigger now. And I'm just going to align it to, let's say, 2 inches on the X and 0 on the Y. And so now, what I want to do is I want to add that logo into the glass. So I'm going to go ahead and import that icon. And but what you'll notice is right now, because of the grid, it's snapping at 1/2 inch increments, and that's not giving me where I really want it, which is somewhere in the middle there. So what I can do is get it close to where I want it, go to position, and lock one of these axes. So I'm going to lock number 2. Now this is where we get really cool. So now that I have the tool, I can still move the tool around, but it only works in one axis. And if I move away from it, like I showed you earlier, we're going to use a pretty simple visualization to show you, and if you pull it back towards it, it'll zoom in. So this is really key. Like, let's say I had
locked on one axis, snapping in the other axis.
Correct. Yep. Snapping on the other, locked in one. But let's say I had a shape out here and I wanted to align it over here. I could actually just look into there and get it really close. And that's, I don't even need to know where it is over here. It may align to another feature on my project. But in this case, we really only care about this. So I'm going to go over here, and we're going to take it one step further. We're going to turn the grid off. So when I turn the grid off here, it's still locked in that one axis, but now it's free floating in the other. So if I want to put it right here, because I visually like how that looks, or lower, it's not going to snap just to the axes, and I can put it exactly where I want. When I hit place, now I have it aligned with that shape and anywhere else I want it to be. So that's a super cool little pro tip that I like to do, especially when your project's like half visual alignment, half the other.
So another example where that could work is if you've got text and you want it exactly, say, 10 millimeters below another piece of text, but you want to just visually compose it left and right. You've all worked with applications where you have to type in values, and it's like 2 inches, 2.5 inches, 2.27 inch, it's just horrible bracketing, trying to find exactly where you want to put it. This is a great way of keeping the visual sort of hands-on approach alive.
Okay, so here's the same thing with some text. You'll notice all the onboard tools now also have position functionality. So in this case, I'm just going to lock it to the X again, like we showed earlier, turn the grid off, because at this spot that I want it to be in, and I'm going to use zoom to get perfect, is not snapping correctly. But if I just turn the grid off while I have one axis locked, I can place that, and now I have a perfect little coaster with my fox and a bunch of text on it. So pretty powerful stuff, with grid on, grid off, locking position. All these features really interplay with each other. So make sure you're checking out some of the videos. We'll definitely be putting more stuff up explaining how all these features work together. Okay, last one, and then I think we need to wrap it up, Sammy.
I want to do more on anchors.
Oh, okay, you do?
No, I'm kidding.
Okay. All right, so last one, and this one's kind of, I hope, to be a crowd favorite. So I'm going to start a new scan here, and let's just imagine this wasn't a workstation. This was just some bigger workspace that I'm working on. And let's say, I was in a rush and I forgot to create a grid before I started the project. So let's just say, and I'm trying to think, put it right here. So I'm keeping it simple, but I have this file here, and it's got a custom anchor point in it. And it's a very simple file, but you could imagine it getting more complex. And I'm going to place it with the custom anchor file. Now I go through project, I cut the project, and then I realize, oh, I forgot to add something to it. In the old days, you didn't really have much of an option to really align stuff that well. But now with Inverness, we can quickly create a grid anywhere using the simple click mode. Now this has a position and a rotation. So if I copy this shape, I can look at the position, I can understand where that element is located in relation to the grid right now, as well as the rotation. And if I just write that down, when I come back into it with my new file, I can type that in with position if I write it down, and that will align perfectly with that space as long as I get the rotation and the position correct. And that's even easier if you align it to the edge of the material, because now you can just delete the old one, import the new one, and you are kind of safe after you've been cutting for multiple hours and you realize you forgot to put one letter, or you misspelled a letter in your design program. So that's a really cool one. There's a lot more little features like this as you're working through the system. I hope that they're super helpful for you too. We did spend a lot of time trying to make it as good as we can, and hopefully we will hear some comments back in the forum, across Instagram, other media sites where you guys can interact with us. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you want to see in the future. We are here for you, and I think there's a lot to be seen in Inverness. Go watch the videos, visit the blog, the support site.
Reach out to us with what you create with it. We'd be really interested to see how you work that into your workflows. Excellent. Thank you for coming by, and we'll catch you in 2 weeks' time.